and his colleagues see fractals as a practical tool, a way to develop mathematical models that might help in diagnosing cancer earlier.
Detecting very small tumors is one of the big challenges in medical imaging.
Burns knew that one early sign of cancer is particularly difficult to see: a network of tiny blood vessels that forms with the tumor. Conventional imaging techniques like ultrasound aren't powerful enough to show them.
We need to be able to see structures which are just a few tenths of a millionth of a meter across. When it comes to a living patient, we don't have the tools to be able to see these tiny blood vessels.
But ultrasound does provide a very good picture of the overall movement of blood. Is there any way, Burns wondered, that images of blood flow could reveal the hidden structure of the blood vessels? To find out, Burns and his colleagues used fractal geometry to make a mathematical model.
If you have a mathematical way of analyzing a structure, you can make a model. What fractals do is they give you some simple rules by which you can create models, and by changing some of the parameters of the model, we can change how the structure looks.
The model showed the flow of blood in the kidney, first through normal blood vessels, and then through vessels feeding a cancerous tumor. Burns discovered that the two kinds of networks had very different fractal dimensions.
Instead of being neatly bifurcating, looking like a nice elm tree, the tumor vasculature is chaotic and tangled and disorganized, looking more like a mistletoe bush.
And the flow of blood through these tangled vessels looked very different than in a normal network. A difference doctors might one day be able to detect with ultrasound.
We've always thought that we have to make medical images sharper and sharper, ever more precise, ever more microscopic in their resolution to find out the information about the structure that's there. What's exciting about this is it's giving us microscopic information without us actually having to look through a microscope.
You can see it rises up as the bubbles.
We think that this fractal approach may be helpful in distinguishing benign from malignant lesions in a way that hasn't been possible up to now.
It may take years before fractals can help doctors predict cancer, but they are already offering clues to one of biology's more tantalizing mysteries: why big animals use energy more efficiently than little ones. That's a question that fascinates biologists James Brown and Brian Enquist and physicist Jeffrey West.
There is an extraordinary economy of scale as you increase in size.
An elephant, for example, is 200,000 times heavier than a mouse, but uses only about 10,000 times more energy in the form of calories it consumes.
The bigger you are, you actually need less energy per gram of tissue to stay alive. That is an amazing fact.
And even more amazing is the fact that this relationship between the mass and energy use of any living thing is governed by a strict mathematical formula.
So far as we know, that law is universal, or almost universal, across all of life. So it operates from the tiniest bacteria to whales and sequoia trees.
But even though this law had been discovered back in the 1930s, no one had been able to explain it.
We had this idea that it probably had something to do with how resources are distributed within the bodies of organisms as they varied in size.
We took this big leap and said, all of life in some way is sustained by these underlying networks that are transporting oxygen, resources, metabolites that are feeding cells. Circulatory systems and respiratory systems and renal systems and neural systems. It was obvious that fractals were staring us in the face.
If all these biological networks are fractal, it means they obey some simple mathematical rules, which can lead to new insights into how they work.
If you think about it for a minute, it would be incredibly inefficient to have a set of blueprints for every single stage of increasing size. But if you have a fractal code, a code that says when to branch as you get bigger and bigger, then a very simple genetic code can produce what looks like a complicated organism.
Evolution by natural selection has hit upon a design that appears to give the most bang for the buck.
In 1997, West, Brown, and Enquist announced their controversial theory that fractals hold the key to the mysterious relationship between mass and energy use in animals. Now they are putting their theory to a bold new test, an experiment to help determine if the fractal structure of a single tree can predict how an entire rainforest works.
Measurements of its trunk, the next
Enquist has traveled to Costa Rica, to Guanacaste province in the northwestern part of the country. The government has set aside more than 300,000 acres in Guanacaste as a conservation area. This rainforest, like others around the world, plays a vital role in regulating the Earth's climate by removing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere.
If you look at the forest, it basically breathes. And if we understand the total amount of carbon dioxide that's coming into these trees within this forest, we can then better understand how this forest then ultimately regulates the total amount of carbon dioxide in our atmosphere.
With carbon dioxide levels around the world rising, how much CO2 can rainforests like this one absorb? And how important is their role in protecting us from further global warming? Enquist and a team of U.S. scientists think that fractal geometry may help answer these questions.
Baseline. Let's try to get the height of the tree measured here.
They are going to start by doing just about the last thing you'd think a scientist would do here: cut down a balsa tree. It's dying anyway, and they have the permission of the authorities.
So Christine, as soon as you know the height of that tree, we can actually figure out the approximate angle that we need to take it down on.
Hooking a guideline on a high branch helps ensure the tree will land where they want it to.
Very good, very nice. Jose, perfecto.
Enquist and his colleagues then measure the width and length of the branches to quantify the tree's fractal structure.
8.
10.06.
No, that's 8. 6.3.
608.
7 on the nose.
They also measure how much carbon a single leaf contains, which should allow them to figure out what the whole tree can absorb.
So if we know the amount of carbon dioxide that one leaf is able to take in, then hopefully using the fractal branching rule, we can know how much carbon dioxide the entire tree is taking in.
Their next step is to move from the tree to the whole forest.
All right, this is good.
13.2, 3.3 R.
We're going to census this forest. We're going to be measuring the diameter at the base of the trees, ranging all the way from the largest trees down to the smallest trees.
3 meters above the ground.
And in that way, we can then sample the distribution of sizes within the forest.
It's 61.8 centimeters.
Even though the forest may appear random and chaotic, the team believes it actually has a structure. One that, amazingly, is almost identical to the fractal structure of the tree they have just cut down.
The beautiful thing is that the distribution of the sizes of individual trees in the forest appears to exactly match the distribution of the sizes of individual branches within a single